The question is, it says, I believe in the prophets, actually, where it says that he will return not because of Israel, but because of his namesake.
This is hard for people to understand, but we can't build doctrine off anything that appears in the books of the prophets. Okay? When someone's not allowed to add to the Torah, they're not allowed to add binding ideas to the Torah either.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, but I know I guess I have pieces of Christianity left in my brain, and I understand that and what happened to your video. But anyway, it speaks that Hashem is speaking to Isaiah or whoever it may have been, and why would not? I mean, I'm not saying add to the Torah, but it is a prophet. It's prophesying. Would that not be?
No.
No.
First, we can't really. Well, this is also going to be hard for people to understand. We can't validate everything that appears in the prophets. Even according to halakha, there's no way to copy a book of the prophets. A lot of these books were copied by memory. I'm of the opinion that the book of Isaiah is written by two different Isaiahs. The Ibn Ezra also leans to this understanding a little bit. Again, we're stuck in a rut here because we've been fed this, especially from the time that we were Christians, that these books carry the same weight as the Torah. The books of the prophets are just there to give you a historical understanding of the life and times of those prophets and how God acted and reacted throughout history. That's it. We're not supposed to build doctrinal ideas. First of all, this goes against the Tochacha. It goes against how God reacted with the 10 northern tribes. He got rid of them. There's no glimpse of them. But God kept those who kept him alive. There's even a state nowadays that calls itself Israel that's full of Torah-keeping Jews. Not completely full, but at least 10% full.
It just seems like it goes without saying. No, I mean, doing it for his name's sake, of course, right? I mean, of course, Hashem is going to redeem the Jewish people.
He's going to redeem us not because of him, but because of what we do. That's the Torah message. So I don't care what a prophet has to say later on. The job of the prophet, first of all, was not to tell us about what's going to happen 1,000 years from now. He was speaking to certain people who knew what he was referring to, and it had to do with a situation they happened to be in.
So would you say it's more like, so would you say that it was a personal thing that God was just reassuring the prophet, like, settle down, I know you're scared, but look, I'm doing my job.
God even said that.
Okay. All right. I'm just trying to put it in the perspective of like Isaiah. Maybe God was just saying, yeah, I'm going to redeem them.
Meritocracy. Yeah. I don't want anything to do with this religion because it just breeds irresponsibility. I've heard many people say, "Oh, the Jews, but they're God's chosen people."
But I mean, we have examples of this. I mean, when Elijah slanders the Jewish people and say, "Oh, these people, they don't even keep bris milah." I mean, now we're told that Elijah shows up to every bris. They don't even keep your statues. They show up we had the 5th cup for Elijah. So, I mean, there's a little bit of what Wade is saying, though. There's a little bit of that.
That's a medrash. First, there's no halacha to have a cup for Elijah in the Seder. That's just a weird custom that crept in. There's one notion that Elijah appears in every bris and every chasana is also a weird medrash that crept in. There was a remnant that God kept for himself. Not that he physically kept them, but that existed and kept Torah alive. But that wasn't because of God. That was because of what we did. The laborer deserves his wages. If we work hard, God's going to reward you. The Torah has a notion initially, it's called zchut avot, that because of the merit of Abraham, he gave the Hebrews an opportunity to leave. He didn't force them to leave. Even the rabbis teach that the vast majority of Jews stayed back in Egypt and even suffered during the plague of darkness, and their firstborn child died as well. He gave them the opportunity to leave. They still had to choose to leave. Zchut avot didn't carry them that far. And then they were bombarded with laws that said that if you do such and such, you shall be cut off from your people. So where's this unconditional love? I mean, I don't see it in Tanakh. At least I don't see it in Torah. It says that he's going to rejoice with your enemies at your downfall if you don't keep Torah. Again, where's this unconditional love? And again, I'm not trying to justify anything in the prophets. Why? Because there's verses in the Torah that contradict it. This notion of unconditional love, this notion that God's going to act for his name's sake just because of the blood running through your veins, that makes absolutely no sense. Now, if it's not because of the blood running through your veins, then it's because of your actions. So then we have no discussion. It's because you're keeping mitzvot, God's going to keep you in his good graces, but not solely because of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yes, that was enough to get you out of Egypt, but that was ultimately always a philosophy, because no one's including Amalek as part of that prophecy when Amalek also comes from Yitzhak and also comes from Abraham. So I'm
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but even out of Egypt, the mixed multitude came out. So it was all those who, it wasn't about, I mean, of course it began because of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the Hebrews, but the mixed multitude were brought out as well because they wanted that covenant. They wanted that. So it's not necessarily whoever's Israel. You've already said this many times. It's not your blood. It's actually your covenant that you have with Hashem.
Right. So the Israelites didn't have a covenant in Egypt. Like, they left just like the mixed multitude left. I mean, I assume that there would be no distinction between the Hebrews and the mixed multitude. I mean, the Hebrews were also, according to the Zohar, down to the 49th level of Tumah. But the understanding was that the Hebrews were also very idolatrous back then and only really left because they saw the smoke and the mirrors and the makos. It's still a meritocracy. They still chose to leave. Also with Ezra, it teaches that most of them stayed back in Babylon. They didn't come to Eretz Yisrael. So it's always a meritocracy. In the times when the book of the prophets were compiled, it probably meant something different to them. Back then, perhaps they weren't as ethically elevated to understand that anything that's not earned only hurts you. Whenever you give people things they haven't earned, it makes them worse individuals. And this is what we see with Jewish people nowadays, because this is what's taught to them, that God's going to reward them not because of their deeds, but just because they're Jewish. This makes people worse if they take it seriously. I don't want to worship a God like that. So if the Torah didn't teach a different message, then I probably wouldn't be Jewish. But being that the Torah lays down this as a standard that God blesses you if you keep his mitzvot, it says that if you keep his mitzvot, then you'll be his am segulah, his treasured people. Only if. I don't care what some rabbi compiled later in the books of the prophets saying, oh, that this is going to happen. That's all hyperbole. That's all symbolism. But if you're going to put them on a scale, there has to be more weight on the side of the Torah, because that's how people understand it. If it appears in the prophets, because it's later, it in some way overrides the Torah. This is how people interpret it. If it wasn't like this, there wouldn't be an Islam, there wouldn't be a Christianity, and there wouldn't be Kabbalistic Judaism, because they ran with the statements of the prophets and they forgot what the Torah said. Or they either combined them together, and because clearly the prophets is a lot larger than the Torah, they overrode the Torah and basically pulled the rug up from under them.
So one of the questions I have is about Genesis. In the beginning of Genesis, we see that there's an issue of creating something from pre-existing materials, and it's organizing these chaotic materials into some sort of order. But as you keep reading, we notice that everything that God creates, he says that it's simply good. But then as you keep reading, you look at Genesis 2, we start noticing that there's an issue of now a concept of a tree that's being created in the garden of good and evil. So my question is the creator in essence the source of good and evil?
I don't think so. Even though there's a statement in Isaiah that does entertain that idea that he creates light as well as darkness. I don't think evil exists like an entity. Evil is the lack of doing good. How could it be understood that he creates evil if evil is the lack of doing good?
Well, I mean, if everything comes from the creator, it would follow.
Oh, but I don't believe everything comes from the creator. I don't believe that God knows the future and knows what you're going to do before you're going to do it. Evil, the way it's taught in the Kabbalistic world, is evil is the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, the Satan. I think that this is a silly concept to describe what we're trying to run away from. We're trying to run away from disobedience. That is what evil is. When someone starts disobeying the bulk of commandments, so they become a monster in society, they should correctly be labeled evil. But to teach that it's something that floats around almost like a demon, there's no good or evil. There is obedience and disobedience. Clearly, that word should be used in society as a deterrent, that no one wants to be labeled this. No one wants to be seen as such a monster that he's called evil. but not that it exists like a separate entity, but that you can reach a level in your existence that you don't deserve to keep your life anymore because you're evil. But I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right.
Appreciate it.